You got to lift weights. There aren't many other ways around that. 2 times a week can be a huge revolution. There's a chance that with TRT, you become sterile forever. You have to make trade-offs. AI can give us drugs that have a ratio of positives to negatives that is just totally unheard of. More people should be on these drugs than not. This is an illusion. Clearly, you're not really Chris Worsley, are you?
So you've become the go-to guy for science-based training and nutrition. What's the 30-second Dr. Mike origin story, and how did that shape your style?
I was born in the Soviet Union in 1991. Good God. I was born in the Soviet Union in 1984. Came to the United States in 1991, attended school and everything like that. I wrestled in high school. I started lifting weights when I was wrestling. I really liked it. I ended up going into my undergraduate program and eventually ended up studying kinesiology or movement science. And got into powerlifting, and then realized I really wanted to get stronger. Didn't really know enough. Got a master's degree, worked in personal training, still didn't know enough. Got a PhD, continued to lift, started competing in bodybuilding, started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. After getting my PhD, or right around the time that I was getting it, founded a company that helped other people with their fitness goals online, and have been a professor for a long time. The company is RP Strength. We have 2 apps, the RP Diet Coach app and the RP Hypertrophy app. Wrote a bunch of books, traveled around the world talking. At some point, someone used a cattle prod to push me into YouTube, and now I talk on YouTube. And I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a competitive bodybuilder, and a person whose office is entirely covered in mirrors, as you can see behind. So strange.
You know what? I didn't know you were from the Soviet Union. Whereabouts? Which country? Which part of the Soviet Union?
Moscow, Russia.
Oh, was it Moscow? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone wants to enter what we'll call the golden age of health, so let's say that's looking great, feeling unstoppable, what are the first 3 things you'd have them focus on?
Good nutrition is a really good place to start. And I can talk about how simple that can be. And resistance training is another very good one. And I could talk all in detail about how that could look for many people. And the other one is, I would say, somewhere between a high degree of physical activity daily and taking care of recovery factors like sleep and relaxation and stress management. And I think those maybe 4 things combined, good eating, good lifting, overall higher degrees of physical activity, moderate to high, and then proper attention to recovery, sleep, etc., are a pretty good way to start getting really, really healthy.
Let's dive into each of those areas in turn then.
In order to support muscularity and in order to minimize how much fat tissue you have, there are a couple of ways that you can eat that make that easier. There are definitely different ways to eat that also work quite well. This is kind of just my default. It's very simple and very straightforward. It kind of checks all the boxes. So for me, the core is to eat several meals per day with a core of protein. Each meal has to be based around a high quality protein source, which can be any kind of bar or shake, can also be any kind of lean meat, lean dairy product, any kind of lean vegan product that has a complete protein source in it. This protein helps build your muscles. It's super important for the rest of your body, and getting enough of it's really good. So if you have basically a fistful size of protein roughly for every meal, then you're pretty good to go, 3 or 4 meals per day. On top of that, it's usually a good idea to slap on some veggies. Veggies are incredibly health promoting. They also fill you up a lot, and then you're not tempted to overeat a ton. So they're very appetite controlling. And those are really good to put in most meals, though it doesn't have to be all meals. And then on top of that, you round out all of your calorie needs for that meal with a combination usually of fruits, whole grains, and healthy fats. And healthy fats are typically monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats like olive oil, canola oil, nuts, nut butters, avocados, things like that. So that is kind of how you should probably be eating in many cases, sort of all the time. That's kind of the default diet. And if you want to eat some BS and junk every now and again, it's totally fine as long as you come back to your normal all around decent diet.
Nice. And then how about exercising? Is it 3 or 4 days a week in the gym doing resistance training, or is it cardio as well? What's
So
the
there's many
best way
different ways to do it. I would say a minimum of 2 days in the gym of resistance training per week, roughly evenly spread. So like a Monday, Thursday or something like that is a pretty good idea. And cardio is well handled. You can do cardio by itself, but it's well handled in general just by high degrees of physical activity for most overall health concerns. So if you get between 8 and 12,000 daily steps on average, just moving around the world, usually that's actually quite good for your health and a very good baseline. You can always do more, and it's a little bit healthier as you increase. But there's also a way to do your resistance training by basically pairing exercises that are taxing unrelated muscle groups, like an exercise which requires you to push, and then afterwards, with no rest, an exercise that requires you to pull, and then with no rest, back to the pushing and back to the pulling, and you kind of just do your whole body like that with minimal rest. It actually gives you an amazing cardio stimulus and a very good muscle growth stimulus. And it does all of the good things that exercise is supposed to do, resistance training plus cardio for the most part. And if you do that 2 to 4 times per week, I mean, you're really checking a massive box, and it only has to take 20 to 40 minutes per session. So we're talking about a very, very minimum entry into actually having excellent health. So that's kind of how physical activity and lifting look from my perspective. And there are many other ways to do it that are also excellent. I just kind of try to get to the simplest, most basic, and least time and input requiring of all of them.
Let's talk a little bit about sort of muscle and aging. You're talking about the power of resistance training for aging well and being generally fit. How can people over 40 and 50 protect their muscles and stay strong for decades to come?
You got to lift weights. There aren't many other ways around that. I look forward to a future in which pharmaceuticals can do that for us. We don't have to lift weights, but that's not here yet. And lifting weights also strengthens your joints. It's also very good for your cardiovascular system, especially if you do it with higher repetitions and low rest. Building a lot of muscle can make your entire body less likely to be inflamed. So it can actually bring the inflammation level of your entire body down. Muscle acts as a glucose sink. So anytime you eat a bunch of food, if you don't have much muscle, your food kind of floats around in your bloodstream. It's not very good for you, raises your blood sugar a lot. But if you have lots of muscle, it just kind of gobbles up everything you eat. And then that doesn't help you lose any more weight because it just goes to your muscles, but it absolutely makes you way, way metabolically healthier. And there's a massive stress relief component to lifting weights very hard. Really, really struggling in a big way can reduce your stress levels a ton afterwards. If you ever noticed after a hard workout, I mean, you're just about as relaxed as can be. And a lot of people go around daily and weekly and monthly with no outlet physically for their stress. And that can be a really tough deal. So, and most people aren't even aware of the fact that an outlet such as lifting weights exists. So there's tons of other benefits, but really you only have to do it kind of whole body lifting for 20 minutes at a time can cover your entire body, especially if you're a beginner or intermediate, and give you excellent, excellent results. It's going to be really tough because you're taking very few rest breaks and doing exercises that involve multiple muscle groups at the same time. But tough for 20 minutes, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, or 4 times a week can be a huge revolution to how good of shape you're in. I'll put it to you this way. If you give me a person who from age 30 to age 60 does 0 resistance training, but then you give me their identical twin that does just 2 sessions a week, for 20 minutes each, that entire time, they're going to have very, very different appearance and health outcomes. And the other big thing here is aesthetics and appearance and vanity, dare I say. It's sort of important for most people, I would say, to occupy a body they like. You know, we choose our outfits, we choose our haircuts, but we don't seem to be able to choose our bodies as much. And some people just exist in a vessel that they're kind of just like it's there. And so a lot of people will benefit even from just the aesthetic transformation of being able to be in a body that they really think is dope. And that makes everything much better.
On X and in real life, I'm seeing quite a lot of these guys. They could be in their 40s, 50s, 60s, sometimes even in their 70s. And they have gone from like a pretty average body to mega jacked over like a 6 to 12 month period. And, you know, I think they're taking TRT. Is that something you'd recommend to the average Joe who's sort of over the age of 40 that wants to get jacked? Or do you think it's only in rare situations? What's your views on TRT?
My views are pretty straightforward. You should be on TRT if you're a candidate for testosterone replacement. That is, if your testicles don't produce enough testosterone to optimize your health and functioning. And so if you think you need TRT, there are 2 ways to tell. You probably need some of both. One is you need at least to have a large minority of the symptoms of low testosterone. Things like low sex drive, low motivation, low muscle mass, poor responsiveness to the gym, poor sleep. And a lot of these are quite general, but, so it's tough just to go based on symptomology. And then so the other thing you have to do is go to get, as you guys say in the UK, your bloods done. Got me bloods done. And we say blood work in the US, but bloods is actually quite simpler. And so as usual, rule Britannia. And in any case, you get your bloods done and it'll show you what your testosterone level is compared to the average range for people of every age and people of your age. And if it's significantly below average and you have a bunch of the symptoms, then you might be a candidate for TRT, and it can make a really big impact on your life. If your testosterone is above average and you feel generally pretty good, but you're just like, should I have TRT? And the answer usually is no, because it's just going to do what your own testicles do, except worse. And now you have to travel with needles and pills and all this other crazy stuff. And
it takes a long time to get your testosterone back if you ever stop taking TRT, right? So in some cases, you stop producing testosterone after taking.
It really ranges between you just get it, you just never goes away, and you just continue to produce testosterone. You come off of the exogenous testosterone, nothing happens, all the way through. For most people, it's going to be several months' time until it goes back to normal. And those are pretty rough several months, because for the first few of them, you're producing very little testosterone. And then for some people, it's also quite rare. They'll never get their testosterone production back. And so that does happen. And it's always a risk if you start TRT, which is why TRT isn't like, you go to the store, you pick up a container of creatine, you take it, something happens, something doesn't, nobody lost, nobody found. TRT is very serious, very powerful drug. And it's a really good idea to make sure that you've really thought it through and consulted various medical professionals to see if you want to take the plunge. The other thing with TRT is if you're still looking to have children later in life, there is a chance that with TRT you become sterile for forever, and or you would need to do a considerable amount of extra chemistry to become able to have children again. And so it's really, really big consideration. But for folks in their 40s who've already had all their kids or don't want children, then that equation becomes a little bit simpler.
And how about the other big sort of medical intervention in the health space at the moment, which is all of the GLP-1s, Ozempic, Wegovy, all of that sort of stuff. Say if you're a couple of stone, as we say in the UK, or 24 pounds overweight, is it worth taking some Ozempic for a few months just to bring your weight down, or are you making a rod for your own back? What's your view on the GLP-1 revolution?
I think it's an amazing thing. I think I'm trying to introduce the nomenclature of modern obesity drugs, because tirzepatide, aka Mounjaro, isn't even a GLP-1 by itself. It's a GLP-GIP dual agonist. There are multiple drugs in the pipeline now, one of them almost through their pipeline called retatrutide, that is a triple agonist, GLP, GIP, and glucagon. And I used to call these drugs modern anorectics because the primary way by which they help your health and reduce your body weight is because they make you less able to experience hunger. And so that's called an anorectic drive. And even that term is outdated, because when retatrutide comes out, it actually boosts your metabolism too, on top of making you eat less food. So really, these are just modern obesity drugs. And so far, almost all the literature on drugs like semaglutide, aka Ozempic, has been that we've scarcely found anything that it doesn't make better for humans. It's just really, really good for your health in almost every measured way. It's actually anti-inflammatory. It reduces addictive drive. It helps your insulin dynamics independent of weight loss. And in addition, it makes weight loss a breeze. And so if you manage the side effects properly, which is mostly based on how you eat and your lifestyle, then a huge fraction of people can benefit from these drugs. I'm of the very curious opinion that more people should be on these drugs than not. So if you have to ask the question, just knowing almost nothing about yourself, should I be taking semaglutide? I would say the answer is yes. Now, that's not just go get it. That's talk to your doctor about it. And currently, it's tough to get if you don't have obesity or diabetes or whatever, but I look forward to that changing in the future. And so if you're, really 24 pounds overweight, what is a stone? Is that 14 pounds or something like that?
14 pounds, yeah, that's right.
If you're, a few stone overweight, then I would say if you would like to lose weight without semaglutide, then that's totally fine. It'll work great. But if you want to be more empowered, experience even more health, and all these other beneficial effects, including effects on cognition and brain health, I mean, I could just keep going on semaglutide benefits. Is anyone could just talk to the Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini and ask, like, what are the research confirmed benefits of semaglutide? It just won't stop talking to you about them. Then yeah, they can definitely do it with the semaglutide, and it'll make it usually just easier and more seamless. What I would say is people would like to do this thing where they take it and then they come off, and that's possible, but the hunger that you experience, the hunger and cravings that got you to that initial weight, unless you make a big lifestyle change and you start eating more of like how I just described with healthy foods and everything, you're just almost certainly going to regain the weight back. And we just know that based on the raw statistics. So what I would say is if you're considering going on semaglutide, losing a lot of weight, I would consider just not coming off and just going to a lower dose that you have negotiated with your doctor that keeps your hunger signaling in check, but allows for all the other amazing health benefits of these drugs.
Is there not a worry that perhaps we don't know everything about these drugs, and in a couple of years' time, something could come down the pike that we don't know about? There'll be some sort of side effect that has not yet been studied. I think a few people were saying if something's too good to be true, it probably is true. So yeah, I mean, is there a worry?
How do those people talk about the cell phone? Where are you right now? You're in the United Kingdom. How the fuck am I talking to you in real life? This is straight up magic. They don't bat an eye at that. Must be too good to be true. This is an illusion. Clearly, you're not really Chris Worsley, are you? So if it's too good to be true, it's probably not. It does not account for technological expansion and innovation. Every single thing that we learn in a society, or many of the things that we learn, accumulate over time, so that we didn't forget a lot of the stuff we knew as a society in the 1700s. We just kept adding to it. And when you add to knowledge exponentially, as we've now seen with modern AIs, you actually get a lot of real deep insights. Imagine if you had a talented athlete that was introduced to a very famous Olympic coach for some sport, and you show the athlete, like, see that 70-year-old man right there? That guy can take you as far as you're going to go in the sport. You're going to be like, really? That old dude sitting there? Seems too good to be true. Like, yes, but he has the accumulated knowledge of, 8 Olympics that he's taken athletes to. Is that just out of the ether? So in much the same way, semaglutide, aka Ozempic, has been around for 20 years being used by diabetics already. And there are lots of diabetics in the United States and the modern world and the UK. And so this is millions of people that have been using it. And so far, no deleterious, ultra crazy long-term side effects have been discovered. And if you're willing to suppose that there could be such side effects after 20 years or after 30 or whatever that are going to sneak up on us, that is absolutely possible. We have to reserve some probability for that being the case. However, in real life, you have to make trade-offs. 100%. Every single thing you do is a trade-off. So on the one hand, we have what happens to the human body with obesity, with diabetes, and generally with not taking semaglutide on the one hand. And we have the benefits of semaglutide on the other hand, plus potentially some of its costs that are kind of unknown. When you look at the costs versus benefits of not taking semaglutide versus taking it, especially if you're overweight or diabetic, but really just probably for most people, they're so completely outlandishly absurd. It's like saying to someone, hey, we're going to give you $1 billion. And they're going to be like, yeah, but if you consider the accounting nightmare that will be for my tax people, they're going to be like, yeah, but the $1 billion is like this much good stuff. And the accounting nightmare is there's the scale, a proportion. So before people just say, well, we don't know everything about this drug, that's totally true. But we have to take stabs in the dark, and using what we know now as our best evidence from 20 plus years of accumulated research and massive mega clinical trials and just millions of people using this drug now in a relatively safe and effective manner, is probably reasonable to conclude that it's better to use these drugs than not. That's a big deal. I think that's like an intellectual, different way of seeing it than most people do.
Absolutely. Let's talk AI. Where do you see fitness and health going with the AI-driven apps and the more advanced biotech? Do you think we're heading to a world of fully engineered diets? Where do you think AI will come in the fitness space?
There are a lot of potentials. It's very difficult to predict exactitudes, but there are a lot of potential trajectories. One trajectory that seems relatively straightforward is most of the leaders in the AI space seem to think that what can be termed universal robotics is quite close, maybe 5 years away to kind of the ChatGPT or iPhone moment where, like, at first no one heard of it. A few months later, everyone has one. And all of the problems to get to universal robotics seem tractable and just a matter of time at this point. There's not like some kind of problem in getting robots to do human-like tasks that seems incomprehensible to engineers that are just like, look, this is actually seriously like, it's like going faster than the speed of light type of problem. We're like, dude, we'd have to reinvent physics for this. There doesn't seem to be anything like that. And the progress in the field is quite stunning, actually, and accelerating rapidly. And so if we look forward a little bit, say, what would it be like to have robots in your home that cook all your food and do all your chores or whatever? And really instantly, a lot of fitness stuff comes up. First thing that comes up is robots could just cook all of your food for you. And, we make the RP Diet Coach app, for example, at RP, and maybe potentially the robot could API directly from the user's app and just cook the meals exactly based on how many macros they need and all of the preferences and everything like that. So if you just eat the food the robot makes you and don't eat anything else, then you're good to go. And you're going to get kind of like very linear results because all of your meals are made for you. So the huge level of empowerment is potentially coming. I'm not sure if corporations that make robots are going to be okay signing the waiver for their robots to train people. Big lawsuit problem there. However, there are ways around it because self-driving cars still do work. At Tesla, you're allowed to hit the FSD button and you're not going to be able to win mega lawsuits against them by saying your car did some damage to me because they have tons of waivers in the way that which you use it. So you say, listen, I'm not really going to be able to sue Tesla Inc. for any anything that ends up having traction as a lawsuit. So there are ways around that. Robot personal training would be an unbelievable thing because then everyone would have a personal trainer and it could spot you and all this other stuff. That would be super great. So there's that potential. But to me, I'm most excited about AI's intersection with fitness. I'm very excited about those grounds, but I'm more excited on the grounds of getting some traction on modifying our biology. And one of the earliest forms of this will be AI's revolution in drug design, because I think that AI can give us drugs that have a ratio of positives to negatives that is just totally unheard of in drug design previously, and can really just like get you kind of almost exactly what you want. So just a quick preview of 3 ways in which this might develop in the fitness space. One is we might have drugs in the future that basically make you as hungry as you want to be with almost no side effects. Now, we're real close to that. Semaglutide has some pretty gnarly side effects if you misuse it, but if you use it properly, it's already halfway there, much more than halfway, 90% of the way there. Another generation or two with AI-powered drugs, and remember, semaglutide was not designed by AI, it was just designed by regular humans. Even just one generation of AI drugs later on that front could basically mean like functionally you're going to weigh whatever you want over the long term. Just keep taking the drug, your appetite will auto-regulate to whatever weight you want, and eventually you just like will just weigh whatever, 150, 120 pounds, whatever you want. That's a huge deal. But there's a little problem with that where people, especially if they don't resistance train, as they lose weight, they lose a lot of muscle. And that's a bad deal for a bunch of health and mobility consequences, so on and so forth. So if we can develop a drug that's an anabolic, which means it grows muscle, specifically skeletal muscle, but has no androgenic effects, like nothing like testosterone would give you or other steroids, then it can be a really powerful tool to give people that drug plus the appetite control drug. And all of a sudden, they have excellent levels of muscle mass, very low levels of body fat, and whatever body weight they want to be. I mean, that's so much of a revolution in fitness and health, and is going to empower so many people to hit the gym to work on balancing out how their muscles look and get their aesthetics going. Because overall muscularity is great, but everyone just wants like way bigger arms and shoulders than they have and a bigger chest, a bigger back. Girls want bigger legs and glutes and all that jazz. And so there's going to be, I think, a huge gym revolution where even more people than ever go to the gym. I think that's potentially possible. And then the last drug I look forward to seeing is a drug that allows you to continue to have a normal or slightly above normal metabolic rate, even though you're dieting really hard. So the problem is when you diet really hard, even with semaglutide and these other drugs, is your body has 18 trillion different mechanisms by which it tries to depress your metabolic drive when it notices you don't have enough food around, because it was evolved in a time where we had intermittent starvation. And it's like anytime you lose weight, your body's like, shit, we're going to be dying. Let's make sure to cut the metabolism low. And this is perceived as, decline in energy. You get cold all the time. It makes dieting really, really miserable. You get brain fog. But it turns out that there are only a few pathways that centrally control this, and one of them is the leptin pathway. And if you can futz with leptin receptor agonism and antagonism with a very straightforward kind of one-shot drug, it's potentially possible that you can diet down, losing like 2 stone, 28 pounds. And at the end of the diet, feel exactly the same as you did at the beginning. High energy, clear mental focus, the whole thing. And it'll keep your body fat just stripping off your body. And if you take that drug drug is just going to have high energy levels all the time. And it's a very different high energy level than like caffeine or something like that. It just feels like you're normal and not dieted to the ground. So full control of body weight through appetite, full control of muscularity through that pathway, and full control of energy levels. If by the early 2030s we have all three drug classes in sort of common use, the people that are still out of shape will just be people that choose not to take the drugs, and almost everyone that is going to be in shape can be in shape.
That would be an absolute game changer. Are companies and startups working in this space at the moment then?
Startups, almost certainly. Big pharmaceutical companies are not working. So they're working on the weight loss components of the drugs with the kind of speed you'd never thought was possible, because they now realize this is a trillions market. The entire world is becoming obese because the entire world is becoming so wealthy, and people like to eat tasty food that's convenient. So buying those two, and you get fat people. And so this is a huge market. And so now the companies, I mean, there are at least 10 next generation drug candidates in that class being developed. Non-androgenic anabolics, I've seen one position paper basically a few years ago calling for like, hey, we need to get on this as a pharmaceutical industry, because sarcopenia, clinically low levels of muscle mass, are a huge problem for global populations and especially elderly folks. And the entire world population is getting older on average. And so this is like a really big future concern that we should be addressing now. I suspect some pharmaceutical companies are definitely developing things like that, though most have not been public with that. And as far as the energy stuff, that's a bit esoteric. Most people who run pharmaceutical companies don't even know that's a problem, because most of them don't engage in like bodybuilding contest prep dieting and don't know how energy draining dieting is towards the end. But what I will say is AI powered drug discovery is so powerful that developing a drug candidate to target a specific receptor class with predictable effects can take like a day or two to figure out in the lab. Well, it did when we developed the COVID vaccine after 2 days. Nowadays, it might take like hours or something. And then you get that drug in, a simulation. You run it for, a couple hundred days and it looks like it's fine. You give it to animals. A couple hundred days later, they're fine. And then you start human trials. So the only stopgap to that is kind of the, FDA and other associations in the EU and the United Kingdom that essentially approve medicines. They usually slow the pipeline down significantly, for safety concerns, which ends up killing a ton of people, but no big deal. I'm not going to get on that high horse today. But basically, some of these drugs are being worked on, but the kind of 0 to 100 of getting the drug from hypothesis to actual production is now really measured as about a 5-year timeline. And it used to be measured much, much greater than that. And hopefully with future deregulation, the timeline can shrink even more. So this is something that I think is really kind of around the corner in a big way.
And if we got these drugs into the market, what knock-on effect would that have on longevity? Would it be people living longer, or people being in better health in their sort of 70s, 80s, and maybe 90s? What sort of knock-on effect would it have?
It's a great question. I think it's going to have almost certainly the effect of expanding longevity by a few years. People already live quite a long time, and the very healthiest people in our societies typically live into their 80s. But they typically don't live into their 90s because the human system was just not designed to live that long by evolution, because the fraction of people that just wouldn't get eaten or die from a bacterial infection or get killed by another human that made it into their 90s back in the day was so small that evolution just didn't even plan for it. Like, can you breathe in space? No. Why? Because, did not evolve to breathe in space. So you give evolution a crack at that for a couple 100,000 years or a couple million years, and maybe it'll get it right. But so to that end, there's going to be this thing where the quality of life radically escalates. And, you will get substantial, maybe 5 or even 10 years of average lifespan to a country added if almost everyone's doing this, because right now our average lifespan for a country is dragged down a ton by folks that are really out of shape, really in poor health, and die in their 50s and 60s. If you have like a large fraction of the country dying in their 50s and 60s because of really terrible health choices, if you almost eliminate that, that's the way means and averages work, is that everyone gets bumped up, quote unquote, on average. But people will still probably die right around their 80s. We need another revolution to kick that further, and that would be the age reversal revolution, which I think is already hypothetically possible. Some of the testing has been done in animals, and cell cultures have been very promising. I think if AI takes a nice big bite of that, then we might have a situation where potentially in the late 2030s, is my guess, we'll be able to age reverse everyone who's in their 70s down to functionally appearing and feeling like they're like 22 years old for forever. I think that's actually realistic. And it sounds crazy when I say it, but I promise I can say even crazier shit to make that seem normal. So that's kind of where I see where that's going. So to answer your question more directly, no, I don't think it's going to add, like, we're not going to live to 100 from just being super lean and jacked and healthy, but very, very few people are going to die in their even late 60s or early 70s, and very many more people are going to die in their 80s and 90s.
How would the age reversal stuff work then? Have you got much knowledge around the age reversal stuff?
Your body has a priority structure for what it cares about the most. For example, if you happen to be a biological male and you're in your early 20s, if you figure out the fraction of the time that your brain just auto weaves your thoughts into getting laid, it's like an enormous amount, right? Totally not concomitant with modern society. Like, if every masturbation session that a male engaged in resulted in offspring, which is exclusively the purpose of ejaculation is offspring, by the way, from an evolutionary perspective, is no other function, then we would be like multiplying the world population by 10 every day or some crazy shit like that, which would be insane. And so you think, man, the body really cares. Evolution really cares about reproduction, like a ton, like every single middle school and high school kid that tries to fix their outfit before they go to school. That's what intuitively or subconsciously, it's all about reproduction. And your body cares a lot about making sure your heart integrity is good, keeping your brain fed, keeping enough food coming in. That's why we're obsessed with food all the time, is because we come from a time of starvation. And so your body has all kinds of limited resources, and it can put them anywhere it wants, but it puts them into what has for our ancestral time been best able to help us survive. And it turns out that because in ancestral times, life is really hard and most entities like organisms just simply can't exist for very long because they die by random chance anyway. And that once you've had a few generations of offspring and you've imparted some wisdom onto them and given them some resources, it gets their time now, and you kind of throw 2 peace signs up in the Nixon helicopter and fuck off. And so that's just how evolution has been working for our species. Remember, sex and dying has actually evolved. Like, there are many kinds of bacteria that just split into 2 and neither one of them dies. And if you keep them in petri dishes, they just actually never die and they don't age. And so they will age from various things like, ionizing radiation, but they don't have any mechanisms by which to counter that. However, your body has a ton of mechanisms by which it rejuvenates itself. But it's really trying hard to get those mechanisms going when you're in your teens and your 20s and your 30s. And then in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you just kind of smokes a cig and goes, bah, and it just stops trying. For example, testosterone declines with age, growth hormone declines with age, and a bunch of the cellular repair processes also decline with age. Not because age fucks you up in some deep way, but because your body just is not designed to keep those systems at the front end of its priority structure. If you express various genes more and express other genes less, you can hypothetically redesign the body's expression to actually prioritize anti-aging immensely. And then your body just doesn't really have to age in any meaningful way. And you can sort of continue to look and feel like you're in your early 20s indefinitely. This is something that's very easy to say out loud, incredibly difficult to do, and is probably almost intractable to do without AI-powered drug discovery and AI-powered genomics. But the age of AI is here, and the potential for AI is the limits of AI's potential are further than the human can imagine as an organism. So whatever it is you think AI can't ever do, you have to examine, is that really the case? Or am I really just not intelligent enough to imagine what an entity many, many orders of magnitude more intelligent than me would be able to do?
Yeah, because it's already designing very unintuitive chips, isn't it? Have you read this? It's designing chips that a human brain just couldn't conceptualize because it's such different shapes and such a different way of designing it. I guess it's like DeepMind Go, where they revolutionized the game, and it was playing all crazy moves that no human could sort of understand. Quick fire round: morning workout or night workout?
Work out when it's convenient for you and when you can be consistent with it. It doesn't much matter. Either way, both have some upsides and downsides. The upsides of a night workout is that it might be more convenient and fun. The downside is that it keeps you awake a little bit longer. It can interfere with deep sleep if you get real jazzed up. The upsides of a morning workout is sometimes it works really well in people's routines and they get it out of the way. The downside of it is it makes you miss out on sleep then it's not so great because sleep is really awesome.
One exercise you love, but everyone else hates?
I do this thing like I get some dumbbells and I lie down on a bench and I curl lying down, and it is really pretty effective for biceps for a bunch of different reasons, but it looks really lame and kind of weird. And so a lot of people think it's not hardcore or tough or whatever.
Go-to cheat meal if you had to pick?
Pasta. I can eat an almost infinite amount of pasta, and so much that I hurt in my stomach, but still continue to eat pasta.
Coffee or energy drinks?
Yeah, I don't drink either. I don't take in caffeine.
Worst gym pet peeve?
A really intense body odor is tough. I've probably been guilty of it a bunch.
Seed oils, hero, villain, or both?
Hero. They're healthier than most animal fats.
Favorite bro science myth to laugh at?
Thinking that training to failure is somehow, I don't know, magical or special or glorious or makes you especially tough.
Oh, really? Okay, that's an interesting one. So would you like do like 3 sets of 10 reps just and just sort of keep it this side of the line, not train to failure?
If you get to within 3 reps of failure or so, you're getting excellent results.
Okay.
The conversation for 3 versus 2 versus 1 versus failure is very nuanced, and it's just not clear if there's an advantage of failure training. But folks like to train to failure for vibes, and I love that. But if they start pretending they're training to failure for any reason other than vibes, then there's a high probability that they're incorrect.
Favorite muscle group to train and the least favorite?
Favorite, chest. Least favorite would probably be shoulders, actually, side delts.
And TRT or GLP-1?
False dichotomy. GLP-1, I'll say, applicable for way, way, way more people.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for spending the time and answering those questions. Great to meet you. Cheers, Mike.
Likewise, man. Thank you so much.